If you've lived with migraine for a while, you've probably heard claims that and suggestions that your symptoms would improve only if you just tried a little harder and thought differently. And I'm here to tell you this talk today is not what this is about. We're not here to talk about curing migraine or just believing your pain away. What I am here to talk about is the evidence, the research, the pain science that tells us why improvement in migraine can be possible even when migraine is chronic. Hey everybody, I'm Adrienne Delorco, the creator of Yoga for Migraine and Beyond Migraine Coaching, and I'm here to explore the question, can migraine really improve with a mind-body approach? My answer might surprise you, as I am a mind-body coach and yoga teacher. So we're going to dive in. We'll discuss what exactly are mind-body approaches to migraine. What are we talking here? Which ones have the greatest amount of evidence, how a biopsychosocial approach to migraine can incorporate these approaches, but not exclusively rely on them. We'll discuss the do's and don'ts when looking for a mind-body coach or practitioner to work with. I'm really excited to share those. And why migraine improvement doesn't mean a cure, and why that distinction matters. So if you have explored mind-body approaches to migraine, I'd love to hear what you've tried. Has it been helpful? Tell me what you've observed so far. And then before we jump in, I want to mention that on January 19th, my Beyond Migraine coaching program opens up. We have a small group coaching intensive that helps women with chronic migraine apply many of the mind-body approaches that we're discussing in an integrative way with their existing medical care to help reduce your symptoms by half. And I actually do offer a 50% migraine reduction guarantee for my new clients because this work is about real change and not just hyped up empty promises. So comment Beyond Migraine if you are interested in learning more about my coaching program. All right, let's dive in, shall we? What are we talking about when we are thinking about drug-free approaches to migraine? What are we talking about specifically? When I'm talking about mind-body approaches, these are generally drug-free, skill-based modalities that help the nervous system learn safety so that the brain can reduce or stop unnecessary pain signals. A common component of these approaches is learning, relaxation, and stress management. They come in two different camps. One camp is more of a psychological approach, and the other camp is non-psychologically focused. So in the psychological camp, you have approaches like pain reprocessing therapy. You might have seen the Curable app or read The Way Out. Cognitive behavioral therapy for pain is another part of this same camp. Emotional awareness and expression therapy, these are very similar offshoots of similar theory in different directions. Somatic therapies, trauma-informed nervous system work. So these might all go into that psychological category. Non-psychological approaches could look like biofeedback, yoga, meditation, or mindfulness-based stress reduction. So now let's talk about what are the benefits of some of these approaches and what is that real evidence behind them. So there is evidence that many of these can reduce migraine frequency and intensity, reduce disability due to migraine, improve quality of life and functioning. They can help you reduce your medication use, which also can reduce side effects. These practices give you a sense of agency that you have some control over migraine, and they can also help improve your mental health. The practices that have grade A, top-notch research, multiple studies behind them that tend to have More studies and better studies, more random control studies are cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically for pain. There's lots of branches of cognitive behavioral therapy. There's one specific for chronic pain that's been shown to reduce migraine frequency and intensity and disability. Biofeedback. So this is something that you do to, often you're hooked up to electrodes, you might have, or simply a little thermometer on your fingers, and you learn through the feedback of these tools how to help regulate your nervous system, how to relax, how to change the temperature of your fingers. And this has grade A evidence as well. And then relaxation training, which can look like progressive muscle relaxation or guided relaxation. These are often integrated in other practices as well, like yoga. So those are our top-notch research, evidence-based practices. Grade B means it's maybe doesn't have quite as many studies, or maybe the results were mixed, or maybe the studies just weren't as top level. Yoga offers grade B evidence for migraine in reducing frequency, severity, duration, and disability for migraine. And mindfulness-based stress reduction also gets that grade B rating. You might wonder, well, what about pain reprocessing therapy? What kind of evidence is there? It's such a new therapy, really just in the last 4 or 5 years, that there's still not as much out there. So to get the the high level of evidence, it does need to have like a few years behind it to build that evidence. So PRT as of yet doesn't have that high level, but it does have a good random control study specifically on back pain. I have heard through the grapevine that there is research being done on migraine, but nothing has been published yet. All right, we've discussed what mind-body practices are, what is the evidence and some of the benefits for doing mind-body approaches for migraine. Now I'd like to discuss, well, should we just dive in, all in on mind-body approaches, or is there something lacking there? And I would argue that we do need to see migraine for the best effective care through the lens of a biopsychosocial model. So if you haven't heard me discuss the biopsychosocial model, you're in for a treat. If you think of migraine being affected by 3 different pillars, maybe you can think of a stool that has 3 different legs. One leg of the stool that affects migraine are the biological factors, our bodies, our hormones, our neurotransmitters, our genetic predisposition, our structural body. All of these things go into the biological factors. Next leg of the stool is psychological impacts that we live with. Our stress, how we manage stress, any anxiety or depression. We can have fear of the next migraine attack. We can have hypervigilance around our symptoms. These all affect migraine and are affected by migraine. And the third leg of the stool are the social factors that affect migraine. Our work stress, our family dynamics, our past trauma, our social isolation, all of those can impact and be impacted by migraine. So the issue that I have with exclusively relying on any one of these stools is that you are not getting the full benefit of working with all 3. When you're only working with one leg of the stool, the other ones aren't there, and your stool's going to fall over. And I see that again and again in how we approach migraine, whether it's only working at it with medication. Typically, medication alone is not going to work for most people with chronic migraine. Similarly, I believe that working with just the psychological or the mind-body approach does not often equal the same most effective results as if we were working with all 3 at the same time. So what I recommend is working with migraine in an integrative way that recognizes the biological factors, the real neurological biological factors that can affect migraine and are unique and individual and very complex for each person. It's not the same for each person, which makes migraine treatment very complicated. And then, yes, we could pull in from the mind-body approaches, and that can bring in even more benefit, and it can make the biological treatment more effective. And yes, we need to work on our social relationships and feel more connected and have feel supported, and all these things build. So my issue is when we rely exclusively on one approach. For example, when mind-body coaches for pain, kind of dismiss some of the biological aspects, or they hype up, just this one approach as the cure for everyone with every type of chronic pain. I do see that as a red flag. So that leads me to, what are some do's and don'ts for working with a mind-body coach or a program or a therapist? What should you look for? What are sus factors and red flags? So red flags that I see in the mind-body chronic pain sphere are when people make you question yourself, question your experience, and that you feel judged by them. Maybe you feel judged that if you take medication, or you feel judged if you still have symptoms. 2, they make you feel that like migraine's your fault. Like you did something wrong, you didn't believe strong enough, you're too stressed out. They should not make you feel like this is your fault, or you just haven't found the right belief system yet. 3, this is a big one for me, when they dismiss the biological factors that are real, that really do affect migraine, or affect all sorts of chronic pain. I attended a talk by a doctor in the mind-body sphere on a very prominent app, who completely dismissed the role of hormones in affecting women's bodies through menopause, and I was just completely floored. So that's a big red flag, when the biological aspects are just so offhandedly dismissed. I think we're on number 4 or 5, when they ask you to really rely exclusively on belief to get better. Belief is powerful. Placebo is a real deal, but it's not all powerful. And often that I see when people do try to work on mind-body pain recovery, when they still have symptoms or they're not 100% cured, they can blame themselves and tell themselves like, oh, I'm just not believing hard enough. And I see that as an unhealthy aspect of some of this work. Number 5, when mind-body practitioners rely exclusively on one type of tool and they say it's a cure. So maybe that's 2, that there is a cure for chronic pain. That is used a lot in the mind-body pain space, and I think it's a red flag. And with that usually they are promoting one type of very specific tool to work for all sorts of chronic pain for every person. Maybe that's journaling, maybe that's somatic tracking, but it's not seen in a personalized way. So that really brings me to number 7, that there's just this one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach, that the treatment and help for migraine is the same for all types of chronic pain for every person. And I really see that as a red flag. I also want to point out it's a red flag when some of these coaches or therapists or even doctors say that meds only work because of the placebo effect. And I've literally heard doctors in the mind-body space say that placebo effect is real, but that is why we have random control studies to balance out the placebo effects. And I really think it's dangerous when meds across the board are poo-pooed and not taken seriously. And there's a judgment with that. So I've combined a few of these, but just to wrap up in red flags, many of mind-body practitioners for chronic pain, they see, the one underlying theory for pain science. Really, we've talked about it, that safety helps decrease that threat and pain response. That's accurate. That's wonderful, beautiful theory. What is a red flag is that when that theory is just extrapolated, that it must work for every kind of chronic pain, for every kind of person in the same way. And there are so many nuances to every kind of health condition and every person. And so I really believe that it's important and absolutely wonderful to learn many of these tools, but we have to be able to see how it works for ourselves and not feel like we are at fault if they don't work for us. So to wrap up, if a mind-body coach or therapist thinks all chronic pain is the same at the fundamental level and doesn't really know much about migraine, all the nuances, and maybe they don't personally live with migraine, or they just kind of see migraine as the same as chronic back pain, as the same as fibromyalgia, that's a red flag to me. I think that somebody that you work with needs to really know and understand the nuances and be highly educated in migraine. Bonus if they live with it and they understand the lived experience of it. So those are all the don'ts. The do's are going to be the opposite, right? Looking for mind-body approaches and programs that help you feel more loving and accepting towards yourself, that don't make you feel like this is your fault, that help you feel empowered, that uses a biopsychosocial lens, that's integrative, that also accepts your choices, whether you want to use medication or not. There's no judgment there. An approach that sees belief as powerful and something we can use and harness to improve migraine, but that it's not all powerful. It's not, there are some limits to belief. It's important to work with someone that is trained in multiple modalities so they can, have more tools in the toolbox, and doesn't just believe in one size fits all approaches, that they can personalize each individual client and what they need and make adjustments without just using the same approach, same diet, same cookie cutter, one size fits all plan. And I think it's important that they are very transparent about what improvement can be expected when working with them, that they're not claiming a cure and that you're going to be 100% improved. It's all these mind-body things can be helpful, but what I'm seeing, even as myself, as a mind-body coach, is that the claims can be overhyped and not realistic, and that it actually turns people off to some of the wonderful things that mind-body approaches can offer people. So in conclusion, do I believe that migraine can really improve with a mind-body approach? Yes, 100%. They help, and there's so many kinds, and you can mix and match, and you can try different ones. It doesn't have to be the same type of approach for each person. There is, as I discussed, great evidence, grade A research on many types of mind-body approaches. But there's the caveat. I don't buy the claim that mind-body approaches are a cure for migraine. And there's the difference. Especially if you are dealing with chronic migraine, I think the most effective approach is combining mind-body approaches with your existing biomedical care, ideally working with a headache specialist. And that really is going to give you the biggest impact and the biggest improvement. While working on just one thing, usually when we are dealing with chronic pain, is not enough. We need to look at every biopsychosocial level to get the biggest improvement. And sending like kudos to anybody who has been cured of migraine. I am not one of them, but my migraine has improved and my ability to cope with migraine has improved over my life. And migraine fluctuates. And so we learn how to move through the different seasons of migraine with more ease, with more functionality, less blame on ourselves. That is what I teach my clients in Beyond Migraine. So if this approach I've discussed, this kind of, real, like evidence-based, not, overly hyped, acceptance of mind-body approaches, but also integrative with our medical approaches. If this type of style sounds good, sounds like something you would connect with, I encourage you to comment Beyond Migraine in the comments to learn more about my coaching program. I have helped nearly 100 women over the years in a very intimate small group setting that's individualized, that uses a biopsychosocial model to help reduce symptoms by half in a short amount of time, on average in 8 weeks. And if you do not get that improvement, then I continue to work with you for free until you do, because there is no rushing any of this work. But we are learning how to bring in all of these practices in a way that feels empowering, practices like yoga, like pain reprocessing, like bringing in healthy daily habits and implementing them regularly enough so that you see an improvement. Comment Beyond Migraine to see how, if you would benefit. We start January 19th. And Beyond Migraine is really for women who feel like they have tried all the meds and supplements and lifestyle changes, but are still struggling. They see their migraine as worsening, even though they felt like they're doing all the right things, and really want to try something different that is actually science-based, a personalized approach that is not another cookie cutter protocol, but something that's going to leave you feeling empowered, have less symptoms, and more freedom. So thank you so much for joining me today. I was really excited to dive into this topic in a real, transparent way. And I'd love to hear what your experience was. Have you worked with mind-body approaches? Have they helped? Are you skeptical? Are you kind of turned off by anything some of the messaging behind it? If you've been cured, I'd love to hear from you as well. So thank you all for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.